Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one stop shop for all news West Asia. And as we start, the US Israeli alliance is threatening more and more war across the region from Lebanon to Iraq and beyond, even beyond West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the news editor for The Cradle, and I'm joined by my friends and colleagues, content creator and writer for The Cradle, Karim Shami, an investigative journalist and also writer for The Cradle, William Van Wagenen. And before we start talking about all of these new Israeli threats, because I already see some questions in the chat about this, Sharmin Arwani will be back with us on Thursday. Set your calendar, everyone. Tell your friends, tell your family, shout it from the rooftops. Sharmin is back in a few days, but stay with us for now. Come on, we'll give you some very interesting analysis as well. So, as I said, the US Israeli alliance is really stepping up their threats against Lebanon in particular, saying the Lebanese state has failed with their. With the diktat we gave them, right? The US ordered them, you must disarm Hezbollah, and they have not. Although I'm looking at a report from Reuters in which they quote Lebanese army sources and saying that they have detonated so many Hezbollah armed caches that they have run out of explosives. Nevertheless, the US Gulf Zionist Alliance is saying Lebanon has failed. They have not disarmed Hezbollah. Now you have the Israeli war minister threatening direct action again, even though, Lebanon has continued to be bombed on a daily basis by Israel. Just this morning, they killed, they bombed a vehicle in the south. Again, this has become a daily occurrence. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of ceasefire violations. You have U.S. envoy Thomas Barak saying the same thing. This is your final warning. We had heard before a few months ago that the Israelis and the U.S. had set I think it was a November deadline or a year-end deadline for the Lebanese army to disarm Hezbollah. What do you guys make of these renewed threats? What do you guys make about the situation on the ground in Lebanon?
Yeah, currently the threats are not only from the United States. They are like alongside the Israeli threats in the media, also in the Hebrew media. Many people are talking about that are shipments and from Iran to Hezbollah, how they are passing, nobody knows. And they are even saying that weapons were smuggled from Iraq through Syria to Hezbollah. They are saying that Hezbollah are like gaining its power back. And also there was a report that came out from the United States, and they stated that Hezbollah, at least they still have around 20,000 missiles, precision missiles, and like 40,000 ready fighters. And also Netanyahu yesterday, he said that we will not allow Hezbollah to regain power. And of course, the people that are aligned with the United States, with the West, and with Israel inside Lebanon, they are also threatening, they are pressuring Hezbollah to hand over the weapons. So I think, unfortunately, I think something might happen from Israel, maybe a ground invasion, maybe an air campaign. We still don't know, but they are preparing the masses psychologically and in the media, and they're also military, because 2 days ago they had also a training and a drill in north of Israel near the Lebanese borders. And also what you said about Tom Barak was very clear. He said that Lebanon is a failed state and they failed to acquire the weapons of Hezbollah, and he can't do anything to, of course, prevent Israel. From the Lebanese side, what happened is that the government said that we are still going to take out the weapons of Hezbollah, but give us time till the end of the year, which is
A
yani,
few weeks.
unless, yeah. So that's the situation. And also yesterday, Gatz, the war minister of Israel, he stated that the Lebanese government should sit aside, because if they didn't, Israel will bomb Beirut. So it was the first direct threat to Beirut and to the government of Lebanon. According to the West and according to Israel, they gave Lebanon, or the Lebanese government, which is Nawaf Salam is the prime
Joseph Aoun.
minister, and Joseph Aoun is the head of the country. For them, I think they considered that they gave enough time to these two, the president and the prime minister, to acquire the weapons or to like take the weapons of Hezbollah. And
To
according to
disarm.
them,
To
they
disarm.
failed. Yeah, to disarm Hezbollah. According to them, they failed, and now Lebanon will face maybe a new war. We'll see. We'll see if the United States will agree upon that, because also yesterday the Israeli broadcasting
Corporation,
radio, yeah, no, the radio,
Israeli
the
Army
Israel,
Radio.
yes, army radio, they said that Israel asked the United States if they can wage like how can bombings in Lebanon, and they said they are waiting for the United States answer.
I
So
wanna very quickly just thank Gulnaz
Lebanon,
Ortiz
yes,
for their super chat. Thank you so much for your generosity, for your continued generosity. Make sure to leave those likes, people. We really could use them. In particular, show some love for the return of Charmaine. I will continue to drop this throughout the episode because I know many people feel very strongly about it. You said something very interesting, Karim. You brought up something very interesting, and I don't know if we can put on screen that link I sent you about the alleged rearming of Hezbollah by the IRGC, by Iran a few weeks ago, an US Israeli NGO released a report in which they detail some of the routes that allegedly Iran is using to rearm Hezbollah, which is, a huge question mark, honestly, something very difficult to verify and also something very difficult to trust completely when you're talking about these NGOs. I think if you continue to scroll down, Karim, you'll see a few more of the alleged routes. Will, I want to ask you your thoughts about these threats from the Israeli command, from Israeli officials, in particular because last week you had hundreds of thousands of Haredim, of the ultra orthodox.
yeah,
They flooded the streets of Jerusalem, opposing the the judicialization, that the charges that would be brought against draft dodgers. Remember the whole Haredim draft crisis that they had. Is the Israeli army in a position to invade Lebanon?
Well, I don't think the Israeli army is in a position to invade Lebanon, but they certainly, the military and the Air Force are in a position to bomb Lebanon or renew the bombing, whether in the south or all the way up as far north as Beirut, as they did during the war, obviously a ton of times, a year ago. So I do agree with Kareem that I would be, I would kind of be reluctant to believe the reports that suddenly Hezbollah is just amassing huge amounts of weapons. Like where they would really come from, who knows? I mean, obviously Syria was the previous transit route for Iran to move weapons to Lebanon. A lot of Hezbollah's weapons were produced in Syria near Misyaf. So how they're getting those now that Assad is gone and Jolani's in power in Syria. I mean, sometimes you hear things about Jolani's people selling weapons to Hezbollah, or you hear, again, that the Iranians are moving them through these different routes, like you mentioned, but it's just really difficult. And in fact, that the propaganda on the Israeli side is kind of inconsistent, because there was a report in Reuters just a couple of days ago saying that the Lebanese army was running out of explosives that they were using to destroy Hezbollah weapons caches that they were locating in the south of Lebanon. And they've been receiving intelligence from the Israelis and the Americans, the Lebanese army has, about where these weapons caches in the south are, and so they can locate them and then use these explosives to destroy them. And they said they're finding so many weapons caches that they were literally running out of explosives to blow them up. So
So they're doing their job, right? What they've been required
yeah.
to do.
And again, according to previous agreements, the Lebanese army allegedly had till the end of the year to do that, and that's still a couple months away. So, to just see almost out of the blue all this media coverage about Hezbollah suddenly having huge amounts of weapons, when Hezbollah has not responded to any of the
The
Israeli
attacks.
violations of the ceasefire. There's 4 or 5 somewhat higher level Hezbollah members that were killed just over the weekend, and there was a big funeral in Nabatea. So, and Hezbollah has not been able to, or has decided not to respond to any of these attacks. All these drone strikes have been happening for months now. So to imagine they just have huge amounts of weapons and they're going to somehow pose a big threat to Israel right now seems like,
It seems a bit like
again,
an
just the
excuse, no?
Israeli media preparing the ground for another potential war, because Hezbollah is weak, is what I would imagine. I mean, that's when the Israelis want to, strike when Hezbollah is weak, that Israelis see that as a chance to go after him.
I don't know if you can see on screen, Will, but this is the alleged new corridors that Hezbollah is using, allegedly through the Red Sea, through what is that, Egypt, then through Sudan, through Turkey, through Iraq, through Syria, through Azerbaijan. I mean, it's possible. It's not impossible to imagine that this is actually happening, but it seems, like remember when the ceasefire started, they were imposing so many restrictions on flights from Iraq to Lebanon, seizing funds that were being sent to begin reconstruction in the south. They were like at one point, this whole propaganda that they repeatedly use against Beirut airport in particular. That Hezbollah keeps weapons in Beirut airport, that they're receiving Iranian weapons. Now, apparently, they're receiving them via the sea and also via the airport as well. It's very strange. So, what happened to these restrictions, right? If this is now the route of,
No,
of,
no,
of arming
it's
Hezbollah.
it's it's unbelievable, yani.
Yeah, I
There is
mean,
no
the other
way.
thing
And
is,
imagine first, if we can like just take 2 3 minutes to comment on this. So first, you see the land routes. They are in red. So imagine that
They go
Sudan.
through Sudan, yeah,
Yeah, Sudan. You have like a war-torn
and
country.
Libya,
Yeah, you have the army and you have the UAE backed
the rapid
like
support forces.
machineries, and yeah, and there is war and everything. And imagine there's a truck full of weapons coming from the country from the right to the left, from west to the east, and nobody is stopping it. And then it goes to Libya, another country which is war torn, and it now is divided to three countries. So this truck will pass through two wars and like around five countries, if we can say it, because these countries, as I said, they
A
are
country
like
that was
divided.
blockading aid for Gaza. Libya
Yeah.
blockaded aid for Gaza.
Yeah, that's insane, yani. And Sudan is a very big country. It's 1.5 million kilometers squared. And if you can't just drive from one side to other, and and go to the biggest desert in the world,
Yeah.
and drive through that. Okay, let's say they did it, and then you have to come from the sea to Beirut. Where to Beirut? Yani, where are these weapons? Lebanon is a very small country. We have only one port, and we have only one
And it was
airport.
destroyed. Remember?
Yeah,
They still have it
it's, it's,
destroyed.
and
that's
the
so
and
funny. And
the
when you see from Iraq, yani first we know Iraq is fully controlled by the United States. The airspace of Iraq is fully controlled from there. So how can a plane travel from Iraq to Lebanon that easy? And we know that there is no
Carrying
cargo
weapons.
planes from Iraq to Lebanon. There are only commercial planes. And if you go to Lebanese airport, it's like any airport. You have like many checkpoints. You have like 4 or 3 checkpoints to come into Lebanon. And you have a missile in your bag, and they let you through. This is insane. And especially if when you see that there's like a
What
pit
about
stop in
Istanbul
Turkey.
airport? I wonder.
Yeah,
What about
Istanbul
Istanbul
airport.
airport?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, people that don't know this region, or don't understand how small Lebanon is, or don't know that Lebanon only has one airport, they might believe it. But me as a Lebanese sitting in Lebanon, and this is impossible.
It,
yeah, I
it,
mean,
it
the
it
other thing
seems very
too is that
improbable. Go ahead. Go ahead, William.
in 2006, after the war between Hezbollah and Israel, there was a lot of destruction in southern Lebanon, and the Iranians very quickly, brought in a lot of money to rebuild homes and compensate people for the destruction. And that hasn't happened. The Iranians, I think they're trying to help, but they can't even get money in to
Yeah,
Lebanon
100%.
to dispense to people whose homes are destroyed, whether in Dahia and here in Beirut or in the other
And any
parts of the
attempts,
country.
have
And
faced
so if they
bombings.
can't even get cash in here to help people rebuild their homes, to think that they can rearm in a major way. Again, all those routes, just exactly as Kareem stated. I mean, it's just ridiculous going through Istanbul airport. Like what?
Yeah, sorry, I missed one, which is I will not put the picture, that which is the Suez Canal. And imagine a ship holding
Yeah, through
weapons
Egypt,
through
exactly.
Egypt.
Apparently the new axis of resistance: Turkey, Sudan,
Yeah,
Libya, Egypt.
yeah. I wish
And
they are that strong, yani, but
but
unfortunately they are not.
yeah, but
It's
that also underscores just how important Syria was. And
Mm,
there was all this
mm.
propaganda from the beginning of the Syria war in 2011 that Syria was the quietest border of all of Israel's borders, and Assad was protecting the Israel border, and Assad and Israel were secret allies. And the Israelis didn't want to see the so-called revolution succeed. And of course, later they ended up admitting, well, of course we wanted to topple Assad, but we realized it was smarter for us to just do it in a quiet way, fund these so-called rebel groups, which included Al-Qaeda and Jabhat al-Nusra and the new president, Jolani. But they just did it in a quiet way. There was no benefit for them to announce that they were helping these groups. But as soon as it happened, as soon as Assad fell, Netanyahu immediately, like the same day, went to the border in new territory that they occupied near Mount Hermon and took credit for it, and was boasting about how everything that basically he was to thank for that. And again, it just underscores how important Syria was in terms of being like the linchpin of the axis of resistance, to what extent it existed. And once that was gone, it's just a really tough blow.
And even in Gaza, yani Sinwar previously said it, or I think I think it was, I don't think it was Sinwar, but this was a Hamas official who said that even the Kornet, the anti-tank missiles that were used in Gaza were sent by Syria. They were bought by Syria from Russia, and they were then smuggled into Gaza. So Syria was very important. I just want to clarify something also for our viewers. Yani now Hezbollah can get weapons, or as Esteban said, it's like impossible to get weapons now from Syria. But also before the assassination of Sayyid Hassan, he assured and he said that now all the drones are being manufactured in Lebanon. So Hezbollah has the capability to manufacture inside Lebanon. Yani even if all the routes are cut, they have this ability. And also he said that they have also the ability to transfer normal missiles into smart missiles. Yani add to normal missiles a guidance system to make it a smart missile. So Hezbollah reached a point that they can do it here in Lebanon. They don't need to smuggle anymore. That's my opinion, and I believe him.
I think drone warfare is obviously, where we are at right now. I think Yemen has. I send you another image, Karim, from is about the drones, since you brought them up. It's also from this Alma report about Hezbollah's alleged, arsenal of UAVs. I think Yemen has already become a very clear example of how a nation that is under siege, under war, under blockade, can develop their own weapons, can develop their very advanced weaponry, in particular, like the Yemeni ballistic missiles, Palestine 1 and 2, etc., and the drones, like all of the drones that they were attacking ships in the Red Sea with. It's not beyond exactly what you said, Karim. I just want to highlight Hezbollah very likely is capable of producing their own drones. Now, this is, according to the same report, to the same people who drew this map that says, Turkey and Sudan and Libya and Egypt are helping Hezbollah rearm. This is what the Israelis believe is Hezbollah's projected drone arsenal, which obviously, went down following the war.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's part also from the big propaganda is that Arabs and Muslims are incapable of doing anything, and if any group fights Israel or do anything against Israel, it should be Iran, because Arabs can do it, and that's what they are throwing. Saudis tried to do in Yemen. They refuse to acknowledge that the Yemenis have the capability and the engineers to produce new weapons under pressure, and the same goes to Hezbollah. Even here, many people in Lebanon, they mock and say that Hezbollah can't do anything because now the routes are cut, and this is part of I think of a bigger propaganda that's been manufactured since years. Nothing to do about 7 October, that Arabs are incapable, and if an Arab wants to fight Israel, they will put him in a sector which is, you are an Iranian mercenary. That's the way that the Gulf information media and broadcast, that's part of the Gulf propaganda, and of course the Israeli propaganda and the American propaganda, that you are incapable, you can do anything against Israel, and if you do so, you are an Iranian mercenary.
It really is disgusting the way the narrative is portrayed. But well, not to go get away from Lebanon too much, but it is worth highlighting that Lebanon isn't the only country that is facing this ultimatum, this disarm or face war. Iraq has also received a final warning from the United States over the Hasher al-Shabi, the Popular Mobilization Units, the anti-terror Iran-backed militias that are actually part of the security apparatus of the armed forces of Iraq, who also represent a significant portion of the government of the parliament. The coordination framework is kind of gives stability to Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, the Iraqi prime minister. Nevertheless, according to Iraqi Defense Minister Tabit al-Abbasi, the U.S. has issued its final and most serious warning to Iraq regarding the Hasher al-Shabi. Apparently, this came during a phone call between Abbasi and Pete Hegseth, in which Hegseth said, concerned hold on. Abbasi said in an interview over the weekend that Washington's latest message concerns armed factions and includes a direct threat in the event that those factions carry out any operations in response to what Washington intends to do in the region near Iraq in the coming days. Not Lebanon and Iraq are headed to elections next year. In both Lebanon and Iraq, two countries that the last time they held elections, they went without a new government for about 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Um, in Iraq, it came after very heavy clashes and after Muqtada al-Sadr, this popular leader that has kind of, he retired from politics a few years ago and now apparently he's back. After, he
I think he
withdrew.
did it 12 times.
Yeah, the man is not to be trusted. In Lebanon, a government that was imposed under fire, under the, following the war, under this so-called ceasefire that has been violated thousands of times by the Israelis. Next year, elections again, more pressure, threat of war. What are your thoughts, guys, about the situation in Iraq? What does the future hold? What do you think? We're gonna see war in Lebanon and then possibly also war in Iraq again?
Well, again, it just seems like ever since the 7th of October, Israel's just been on a run, just hitting all the different enemy states, essentially. And every time the fighting stops in one place, they just initiate it in a new place, or when it stops in one front, they initiate it on another front. So, as you mentioned before, I mean, the Hashid al-Shabi groups, or the Iraqi resistance groups, they helped in terms of firing drones and missiles, towards Israel, as Iran was doing that, and as Ansarallah was doing that, and
They were
as
hitting U.S.
Hezbollah was doing
bases.
that.
They were hitting U.S. bases. The Hashem.
Hitting U.S. bases within Iraq, but then also sending some towards Israel.
Yeah,
They
and
hit
Syria
the U.S.
also.
base in Atemf on the Syria, Iraq, Jordan border.
Yes.
So the question is whether, again, the Israelis are going to, now that things are quieting down to some degree in Gaza, the question is whether they are going to come to Lebanon, as we've discussed, but then also maybe see if they have the chance to go to Iraq and destabilize things and weaken those groups. So just like in Lebanon, we've been seeing the reports about Hezbollah, like supposedly rearming. They're all of a sudden in the Israeli media, there are all kinds of reports that the Hashid al-Shabi are preparing for a 7th of October style attack or something like that, using even like ground forces and drones. And again, it just doesn't seem reasonable, like for those groups to do like a land invasion and get all the way to Israel. They'd have to go through the reports are saying they'd potentially come through Syria. So that means they'd have to go right through where the U.S. has their base in Atemf on the border. And then also go through Jolani's, the so-called Syrian army, go through Jolani's, extremist fighters there, and they'd have to avoid just getting bombed from the air by Israeli and U.S. planes. So again, it just seems a bit ridiculous, and it seems like the Israelis again are just like pumping out all this propaganda because they always need pretexts. If they want to start a war or initiate aggression, which they always do, but they always have to first have some pretext or say that they're responding to a threat or something like that, which is what they always need to keep American weapons flowing. And so again, in Iraq, it just feels like the same feels like the same thing to me.
I want to thank Rain2115 for their super chat. They say they can't hear us very well when they go outside, so we'll try to speak up because I think our levels are actually pretty equal at the moment. Nevertheless, thank you so much for your generosity. Um, William, do you think, because something we haven't really discussed here on the podcast, but it's a topic that continues to I don't know. It's very interesting. Is the situation with the SDF, with the Syrian Democratic Forces, the push for them to unite into this, HTS, Julani controlled ISIS Al Qaeda army, that is the Syrian armed forces. They've said no before, then they are kind of pushed to say yes. Turkey is saying there can't be any fragmentation in Syria. The Kurds need to be part of the government. I think the latest news from that was that they named some commanders that are going to be merged into the so-called Syrian army. Uh, could this entity, whatever it becomes, be used against Iraq? Because all of a sudden you have a different reality on the Iraqi border, and in particular, you have those camps of ISIS fighters and their families, which have been referred to by U.S. officials as an ISIS army in waiting.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of Yazidis, for example, who live in Sinjar in western Iraq and who suffered the genocide by ISIS in 2014, they are really scared that now that Jolani's in power in Syria, that his forces could be sent across the border and to try to do again what ISIS tried to do in 2014, which was to break up Iraq into different to break up the country. And again, it's important to understand that in Iraq, it's the U.S. and Israeli allied Kurdish forces of Masoud Barzani that are really behind ISIS and that use ISIS as a proxy, because the Kurds want their independent state in Iraq, and the Israelis want the Kurds to have an independent state in Iraq in order for the Israelis to access the oil there, in particular in Kirkuk. So anyways, now that Jolani is in power, there is the chance that ISIS could, reemerge in Iraq in a strong way. A lot of the fighters could come across the border, and that could be facilitated by the Kurds and by the U.S. So, that is definitely a danger. So it is important to keep an eye on what happens with all those ISIS prisoners. And again, it's just important to understand that it's the U.S. behind the ISIS project, the U.S. and Israel, and they just use ISIS as a tool as they need it, So it's definitely a danger, yeah.
What do you think, Karim? What do you think could be the possibility? Like this shifting the past year, that we've seen of like shifting alliances, shifting control, in particular with Syria. What do you make of the situation of these threats against Iraq?
I think the United States can do whatever they want in Iraq. They can launch, as you mentioned, they can launch these sleeping cells, or they can directly bomb because they did it before. It depends on what they want. First, all what happened is because they wanted to out Bashar al-Assad, and they made many projects with the Gulf countries and with Israel, and and every even country had its own group. And Saudi Arabia had a group, Qatar had a group, UAE had a group, and now there is no Bashar al-Assad. I don't know if they want to make like a big war, so they can like make everybody fight together to get rid of them. Still, we don't know what's their aim. But this is regarding the armed group. But regarding the Israelis and their like security, because they are threatened from the Iraqis, I think they can launch airstrikes there, because they did it in Iraq and Syria and other places, and many times these groups were targeted and they didn't know from where they were targeted. Even the officials of such groups that according to Israel they possess a threat to Israel, sometimes they are targeted and they didn't know even if they were targeted by the Israelis or by the Americans. So I think these groups are already very weak, although they are willing to fight and they are against Israel, but they don't have, I think, the technology or the capability to stand against airstrikes. I think, unfortunately, that's my opinion regarding this.
I mean, not even the Qataris could counter an Israeli airstrike.
Also, till now, I said it more than once. Till now, we don't know how Israel bombed Qatar. We don't know the route. There's no
It
official.
was CENTCOM, no doubt about it.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
I want to thank Mohtar Dansari for their super chat as well. I'm not sure what denomination is this, but thank you very much for your generosity. And they ask, how is Iraq divided? I think maybe, well, Karim or William can give a very brief answer about that.
Yeah, Iraq is divided. First, the United States, when they came in 2003 and they occupied Iraq, they made the president, for instance, Kurdish, and the prime minister should be like a Shia, and the head of the parliament should be a Sunni. So first, this is where the divide started. They did the same in Lebanon previously after the civil war, and now you have north of Iraq is divided. It's called Kurdistan Iraq. They have their own language. They have their own everything. It's like semi sovereign country there. And there's many problems between North Iraq and South Iraq, especially in petroleum. And for instance, there's many allegations from the central government in Baghdad accusing the Kurdish people or the people that live in the north that they are smuggling oil and selling it to other places. And the government inside Iraq, they can't do anything. They don't have the capability to send anybody to the north and control the situation. So that's one. And the second is that the United States still now they have full control over Iraqi airspace. The Iraqi army and the Iraqi intelligence, they don't know what's happening in their airspace. Until now, every now and then, if you can go to Twitter and search, or even in Telegram, there are constant American drones hovering or flying over Baghdad and other places in Iraq. And also till now, there's here. William can comment, he knows more than me. In the west of Iraq, there's still cells of ISIS residing there, and the government can't do anything. That's talking about the central government of Iraq. And if you go to the south, you have somehow full control of Saudi Arabia and UAE. They put money there, they put many things there. So that's how when we say it's divided, that's how we say it's divided. The north is has like completely different policy than Baghdad, than the south, than the east. Sorry, west.
Yeah. So to add to that, going back even to the 1980s, there was a very famous report by an Israeli journalist who was previously in the Israeli Foreign Ministry named Oded Yanon. So he wrote what was called the Yanon Plan that talked about how the Israelis wanted to divide Iraq up into a Kurdish area in the north, a Sunni
In
area in the west.
1984, if I'm not mistaken.
Could be early 80s. They wanted to divide it into a Kurdish region in the north, a Sunni region in the west, and a Shia region in the south and in Baghdad. And the idea was they wanted to do the same to Syria. And as you mentioned, they did the same to Lebanon. And the idea is they never want to have a strong, powerful Arab army anywhere in the region near them that could challenge them. And if they could divide these countries up into like weak, mini, like religious, ethnic statelets, then that's going to allow the Israelis to basically maintain hegemony over the region. And it also helps to justify Israel's existence as a quote unquote Jewish state if all the other states in the region are based on ethnicity and religion, as opposed to say just a Syria that has many different ethnicities, or an
like
Iraq that
secular
has many
states.
different ethnicities.
Very-
Again, that's always been the Israeli plan. And so again, when you see what's happened in Iraq over these past decades since there's been U.S. intervention, really starting in 1991 with that Gulf War, but then also again in 2003, and then again in 2014. The basic idea of the Israelis was to again divide the country, and the main part of that project was to create a Kurdistan that's either semi-autonomous or as autonomous as possible, or even independent. And that's what they're trying to do now in Syria. So there's all with the SDF. So there's all this discussion, Esteban, as you mentioned, between the central government backed by Turkey and with the president there, Jalani, and they're in discussions with the Kurdish-led SDF in the northeast about whether to integrate their forces. But there's always talk about that, and Tom Barak will say things like, "Oh, we want Syria to be unified," and the Turks talk about how they want it to be unified. But when it comes down to it, the Kurds basically just say, no, we're going to keep our military forces. And if we integrate into the Syrian army or into the central government in Syria under Jolani, it's going to be really just an integration in name only. We still want our own Kurdish-led units. We want our Kurdish commanders, and basically they want to keep the SDF in place, but just kind of put on some Syrian government uniforms, and that's it. And so that's how the U.S. and Israel have been able to keep Iraq weak, is, like you said, having separate Kurdish army in the north, the Peshmerga, that functions alongside the Iraqi army. And I'm sure that's what they're going to do in Syria, despite all the talk of like unifying and integrating the SDF. The SDF is going to keep control of its own units, and that whole part of the country will remain, autonomous. And they're going to try to make it that way in the south with the Druze,
What will the
and they're going to
what
try
will
to make
Turkey
it that
have to
way
say
also
about
in
that,
the west.
William? What would Turkey have to say about that? Because the whole a unified Syria state really seems to be, a Turkish demand.
Well, personally, I think it's just rhetoric, because the Turks are happy to divide the country too. The Israelis want to divide the country, but the Turks are happy to divide it too, because they can get the areas that are traditionally, or that they believe are part of, of what were the Ottoman Empire and that should be part of Turkey still, which are Aleppo, Idlib. Idlib is already basically a Turkish colony. Like they use Turkish money there. There's like Turkish cell phone companies there. So Idlib is already essentially like a colony of Turkey ever since 2015. But as long as the Turks can get Aleppo, Idlib, then even further south to Hama and Homs, and essentially have influence in Damascus, they're happy with that. The Israelis will be happy with southern Syria, and then the U.S., and by extension, the Israelis and the Kurds have the northeast. And again, it's looking like the Israelis are positioning the Russians to take over the west of the country. And, that's how the country will be divided. It will stay weak and fragmented, just like the Israelis want. But the Turks, in my opinion, will be happy with that,
I want to
because
bring
they're
up
still getting a big chunk of the country. So
this is a very interesting map, by the way, Karimo, how the idea of Kurdistan has been used for so long to perpetuate others geopolitical
Yeah,
goals.
100%. I just want to clarify that's why for many countries, especially Turkey and Erdogan, why they are against Kurdistan, Iraq, or other places, or even in Syria, because if they manage to make a country in Iraq and Syria, they fear that Turkey is next. And there's, according to like statistics, 15% of Turkish people are Kurdish. So this will create a very big problem in the region, and also in Iran. There's few millions of Kurdish people. So if they manage to, like for instance, make a country in North Iraq and then add to it Syria, this will be a big threat to Turkey and Iran also. And I just want to mention that there's Kurdish people that lived in North Iraq and in the mountains spanning from Iran to Turkey through Iraq for more than 1,000 years or so, but there was never a Kurdish state. So the idea of a Kurdish state is a new idea, and it's backed by Israel and the United States.
I
And
want
but
to
of course, we have to say that also Saddam Hussein and previous Arab leaders, they treated the Kurdish people not that good.
to
So
say the
it's
least.
somehow complicated, yeah,
To
to
say
say
the
the least.
least.
but
I want to
just
bring up.
to add
Yes.
too,
Go ahead, William. Go ahead.
when you look at that map, all the areas that are red that would designate, what could be a potential Kurdistan, it's important to remember that in all those areas there are tons of other ethnic groups there.
Yeah, 100%.
So even in northeast Syria, it's the Kurdish-led SDF that controls the northeast and has the autonomous region, but the majority of the population isn't even Kurdish. A lot are Arab, Sunni Arab Muslims, and there's a lot of Christians. So in cities like Hasaka or Kamishli, it's even just part of the population that's even
But they
Kurdish.
had a stronghold there because they fought with Turkey and during Saddam Hussein, and they find like somehow a safe haven in northern Syria because, as I know, that Hafez al-Assad like accepted the Kurdish more than other leaders. So by time and after the Syrian war, north of Syria became a very stronghold for the Kurds.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. But I'm just saying that within these areas that are under Kurdish control are all these other ethnic
Yeah.
groups that the Kurds often, more so in Iraq than in Syria, but that the Kurds treat, very terribly, and they're trying to take the land of the Assyrian Christians. They're trying to take the land of the Yazidis. And as I mentioned earlier, not that many people know it, but when ISIS did the genocide of Yazidis in Sinjar, which is in this red area in northeast Iraq, or northwest Iraq, sorry, the reason that Masoud Barzani and the Kurds unleashed ISIS onto Sinjar to do the genocide against Yazidis is because Masoud Barzani wanted that territory to ethnically cleanse it, get rid of the Yazidis, and annex the territory and repopulate it with Kurds. So lots of parallels with exactly what the Israelis, of course, are doing in Gaza right now. That was the same idea that Masoud Barzani had for Sinjar, and they did the same to the Syrian Christians in the Nineveh Plain, like in Mosul itself, and then in all the traditionally Christian villages to the east of Mosul, between Mosul and between the Kurdish capital Arbil. There are all these historic Christian communities, and Masoud Barzani did the same thing, where he allowed ISIS to descend on all these towns and ethnically cleanse them of all the Christians. So anyways, what you're saying is all totally correct, but I just want people to remember that when they see that map, it's not that is homogenous Kurdish territory, and that the minorities are there within
Very
that
interesting.
area.
Very interesting, William. There's always some interesting discussions in the chat too, but mainly they're about our volume. I hope everyone can hear us fine. I want to bring up a feature by the always brilliant Dr. Mohammed Hassan Suaidan. This feature we published yesterday, 2 days ago. And the title says it all. West Asia is no longer our battle. Moscow withdraws from the arena. And I think this is something that has become apparent to anyone who has been paying attention. In particular, Hassan Suaidan, who has, by the way, joined us for several episodes here on the podcast. If you haven't seen them, please go check them out. Brilliant, brilliant mind. He, in particular, points to the 5th International Research and Expert Forum that was hosted a few weeks ago, in which, in particular, Andrei Denisov, a member of the Council of the Russian Federation, told delegations from Lebanon, Egypt, Libya, Syria, Jordan, the UAE, Kuwait, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and, Russia, that in West Asia, there is only one player, and that is the United States. Any other player who intervenes will lose, because the United States will not allow any international actor to operate freely in the region. And just before I let you guys go on with your thoughts, he also highlights, Mohammed Suaidan, is that Russia is increasingly moving toward a model closer to the Chinese approach, that is, avoiding direct involvement in conflicts, building channels with all parties, concluding economic and technological deals, managing flexible relations, etc., etc., etc. I think that was very apparent with the visit of the head chopper-in-chief himself, Ahmad al-Shara, to Moscow. The picture of Vladimir Putin shaking his hand, welcoming him, marking an absolute break from what we had seen from Russia since at least 2015, over the past decade, and what they had sought to do by deploying troops in their air force in Syria, back in Iran, in many ways, really, kind of positioning themselves as an alternative to the U.S. It seems the Russians now have fully withdrawn. They say West Asia it's a U.S. Controlled territory, and we are way more concerned about Eastern Europe and our southern border than we are about trying to secure some sort of hegemony of ourselves here. I don't know if you guys read the article. I don't know if you guys read the feature. It's truly fascinating, and to people listening, I would recommend go and read it. It's a very, very interesting piece by Mohammed Suaidan. What do you guys make of this new Russian approach to West Asia?
And I agree with him. Yeah, and I think Russia spent a lot of money in Syria, and they tried to like put a foothold in the region, and they have their base in Tartus. And what happened at the end of last year, I think it was a big blow for Russia. Although many people say that what happened is because Russia wanted it, but eventually I don't think them having a base under the protection or under the rule of Giuliani is better than Bashar al-Assad as Russia. And I think because the war against Ukraine, now it's like the third year, or I think it's the fourth year. We are approaching the fourth year. I think this also weakened Russia, although they knew how to handle the sanctions very good, and everything else is very good. But eventually the war has a price, and I think them leaving the region or being very weak in this region is a fair price that Russia is paying.
I mean, they are still, like partners with, of course, they are leading, OPEC Plus with Saudi Arabia. They are in bed with the Israelis. They are in bed with the Emiratis. They are, they just kind of like, I think the interesting part of this is also, like kind of like the mirroring
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
Chinese
Esteban.
approach.
Yeah, but what I meant is that, for instance, previously we have many parties that were aligned with Russia, even in Lebanon, Syria also. Yeah, for instance, in Syria they used to uh, teach them Russians, for instance.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not only like some obvious political gains. That's what I mean by they lost it. Yeah, for instance.
Mhm.
There are many doctors in Syria, Lebanon, and even Iraq. They took their degrees from Russia. You know what I mean? They
Yes,
had many delegations in Lebanon and across the Arab world. I think that has been weakened.
I think.
And
Well,
even for instance, people just going to Russia to get education, they had like delegations to influence people to go to Russia. For instance, you had many Russians speaking Arabic, so because this region was very important for Russia, but I don't think they are capable to maintain these relations. And of course, after the war, what happened in 7 October, unfortunately, I think at least for this time frame, the upper hand in the region is unfortunately the United States. Although I don't think, for instance, the peace deal will be accomplished or will be like successful 100%. But we're seeing that the final word or the beginning of any negotiation in this region is being held by the United States. Russia, I don't think they have enough power to exert in this region anymore.
I mean, it's kind of also a byproduct of the Ukraine war, which is nearing 4 years. I saw Dmitry Medvedev a few hours ago tweet that the West has given Ukraine like about $500 billion in funds to just keep this war
Yeah,
going.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
And
This is the point that Russia is somehow alone. Yeah, and for instance, when you see how the United States and the West, for instance, provided weapons to Ukraine or to Israel during the past 2 years, and if you look, Israel is fighting like a small group in a very small strip, which is as big as like. Any city in the world, and they provide all this. But in return, when you look about Russia, you will not see like there's a country that is willing to do whatever Russia wants, except Belarus. But if you if you zoom out, you'll see that till now, Russia is helping Belarus more than Belarus helping Russia. You know what I mean? And also they try to enter in Libya, and they send weapons, and they have Haftar, who's like he
well,
considers Russia as their ally, but
they're
I
really
don't think
trying.
they are.
They seem to
Yeah,
be trying to fill the hole in the Sahel region of Africa as well. Like with all the French and the US kind of getting kicked out, Russia
yeah.
really seems, in particular, not be at the Wagner group, and well, just the Russian government itself seems to be opening the doors and
Mm.
trying to, get a foothold here. In the chat, Shahin Shahi also says, actually, Russia wants foothold in Syria. That is why Putin met Al Julani. What do you make
Yeah,
of
of
all of
course.
these?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's just not mean one
Go ahead.
comment at yeah, and that's what I said. That they still have the base there. And Julian said that they don't care about this base. And no, Russia can maintain this base. But if you zoom out and look, if you're like, for instance, another country that is seeking protection or seeking like advanced weapons from Russia, what happened recently during the Israeli-Iran war is not good for Russia also, because till now we don't know what really happened during this war. The intelligence was not that good, and air defense was not that good, and from Iran and also from Syria. Yani they waged a war, and they went there in 2014, 2015 to protect, or no, I think, but no, they went there to protect the government and to prevent like extreme Islamists to take control. And now they are shaking hands. This picture is bad, I think, for Russia, not for Julani. That's my
Completely.
opinion.
Completely, I agree with you. What are your
Well,
thoughts, William, about this new pragmatic Russian approach? What does it mean for West Asia?
well, I do. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that because, we've seen some strange things, or what seem to be strange, from Russia in the last couple of months. As you mentioned, Jolani visited Russia and was welcomed. But also previously, Jolani said that essentially when he and his forces were taking over Syria back in December, that as his forces were on the outskirts of Hama and there was a battle going on there, that there was essentially an agreement with the Russians, for them to back off and allow Jolani to come in and take Damascus. But there are other suspicious things previous to that, because Jolani's forces, they came from Idlib. When they first started the attack, they went towards Aleppo in the north of the country. And those roads between Idlib and Aleppo, from the city of Sarakab, for example, it's just wide open territory. It's totally flat. There's only one road. So as Jolani's forces were leaving Idlib towards Aleppo, the Russians could have easily bombed these columns of HTS fighters as they went, but they didn't. They did a couple token airstrikes, but not until those forces had actually entered Aleppo itself. And then also you see this weird thing where in February, Netanyahu visited the US and he presented a white paper to US officials where he was arguing that Russia should be allowed to keep the bases in Tartus and Hamamim in Syria. And US officials were shocked. They're like, wait, you're lobbying us to allow Russia to keep their bases? I thought Russia was our enemy. And Netanyahu was like, yes, we want you to allow Russia to keep your bases there. So if you look back on the Russian relationship in Syria, like, again, I always viewed them as being like a strong ally of Assad, but there are some other weird things that go back even before this last year. For example, after the war really ended in like 2018, 2019, the Israelis continued to bomb Syria regularly. They called it the war between the war. And I know for a fact that the Russians did not allow the Syrians to use their S-300 missile defense to repel these Israeli attacks. And Syrians were constantly wondering about it. There was, there'd be Syrian soldiers dying in all these Israeli attacks, and Syrians would be like seeing the funerals and seeing these guys dying. And they're like, why can't we use the S-300s? And I know for a fact that the Russians did not allow them. So then when you get, as you mentioned, Kareem, to the war in between Iran and Israel, like in the weeks before that or the months before that, there are kind of these military agreements that had been signed between Iran and Russia. And, Iran had been providing drones, the Shahed drones, to Russia for use in Ukraine before that. But it seemed like there was a military alliance between Russia and Iran. But then as soon as Israel launched the war and then the US joined, Russia was just nowhere. And they said, oh, well, we never had like an actual mutual defense pact that said we would actually, fight to protect you in the case of a war. And Putin ended up making comments saying, like, what do you expect from us? Like, Israel is basically a Russian-speaking country. There's probably 2 million Russian-speaking Israelis, and there's a lot of Russian Jews that have a lot of influence and money in Moscow. A lot of the oligarchs Russian oligarchs have Israeli citizenship. The Chabad Lubavitch is very powerful in Russia. So I don't know, over the past year, I've had to really kind of reevaluate a lot of my views about like which side Russia is like really on in many of these instances. So.
Well, it seems it's changed a lot. The final question here, and this is kind of how Mohammed Swaidan finishes his article, and I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on: is this new strategic, I don't know if I would call it withdrawal, possibly a strategic withdrawal? Does it include Iran? What does Iran have to expect from the war against Iran is going to be reignited? I think that everybody can accept that this is just a fact. It's just a matter of time, really. And the Iranians at this point are facing, I think, like some of the worst sanctions since the maximum pressure, since Donald Trump exited the JCPOA about 7 years ago. It's Russia ready to engage with Iran in a deeper defense, I don't know, paradigm than they have before, or is Iran still kind of on their own?
Well, yeah, I just think Iran is on their own. Yeah.
What do you think, Karim?
Yeah,
I feel like you might agree.
Yeah, like today, Lavrov said they asked him about this, and he said we are providing Iran with the military necessities that it needs. So that's what was his comment. But will they work against Israel and against the United States? We don't know. Yani, many people criticized me during the 12-year war, but really there was a big Yeah, there was a big problem with the air defense and the Iranian radars. يعني one, for instance, let us be frank. And for instance, if a missile was launched by Yemen into Israel, the Israeli army would know in the same minute, and they release like warnings at the same minute. But the Iranians, I never saw an Iranian report or the Iranian army warning that a missile is launched by Israel or from an Israeli airplane. So this tells a lot about the defense capabilities of Iran, and I think. Till now we don't even know that if they used the S300, even the radars of the S300. I'm not talking about the missiles. When I say S300, S300 is they have like four components. The
It's
most
a
important
system. It's
one,
a whole system.
yeah, it's a system. Yeah, so I think this is the weakness of Iran. Yani for instance, because the assassination that Israel did inside Iran, not in the first day, later on. Yani if Iran had like the defense capabilities to know if there's an airplane or missile coming outside from the country, it would be easier for them to like يعني warn their people, or even the officials will know, okay, maybe in 2 3 minutes they will target me, let me take shelter. But I didn't think this was the case. I think also that Russia is very penetrated. يعني whatever it gives Iran, I don't think Iran can be fully يعني beneficiary of the Russian technology in defense. I'm talking in defense, not in offense, because we saw that Iran has the capability to bomb any place in Tel Aviv, and it was very difficult for the Americans and the whole world to stop these missiles. But the problem is in defense, because during the Ukrainian Russian war, I think the Russian weapons and the Russian defense capability was very exposed by the West, and of course, eventually by Israel and the United States. So
I
I don't
think
think what the capability that Russia can offer. I think the Chinese, if they agree, I think it's because they are more closed. Their army is more closed. Their technology is like not known as the Russian. They might benefit Iran more than Russia.
I think we are about to see a big test of these of the reliance of the type of assistance that Russia and China can provide in Venezuela, where also, it seems just like a
Yeah,
complete matter of time before we see U.S. warplanes bombing Caracas, trying to kill
there is
some of
no
the
Israel
leadership.
in Latin America. We'll
There's
see.
no, I'm sorry.
There's no Israel in Latin America, so we'll see.
But we have the United States, man. Like we have it. They're right there. They're right there.
Yeah,
They
no,
and,
no,
and they
yeah,
serve the
I
same
mean,
purpose.
yeah, I'm commenting because you said that Putin said that Israel is a Russian-speaking country, and
Mm.
he like hinted we can't do anything against Israel, but there's no Israel in in Latin America, so we'll see how the extent of help that will
Yeah.
reach Venezuela.
And I think it's going to be a test of how engaged they want to be. Venezuela, another historic ally of Russia, they also have weapons factories, they also have drone factories, they also supposedly have some air defenses, they have satellite assistance from the Chinese as well, they have some Russian fighter jets, etc. We will have to see, but it really does feel like these powers are withdrawing, in Russia in particular, right? It seems that they are really rethinking their position, and maybe they're playing the long game, right? In any case, these are obviously just our opinions. And come Thursday, you're gonna see the return, the long anticipated return, the one you've been crying for so long, all of the complaints for the past few months. Sharmin Arwani is back with us this Thursday. Make sure to tune in. I want to thank you guys. I want to thank William in particular for filling in, helping us out. I want to thank Sima as well. I want to thank Karim, for the work we do here. I want to thank everyone who joined us today, to the people who gave in the super chats. Make sure to check our subscriptions here, our memberships here on YouTube. Make sure to leave a comment after the video is over, even if it's just to complain about the audio. Just make sure to leave that comment, leave that like. Check out our Patreon, where you can become a direct supporter of the Cradle. Help us continue to do the work that we do here. Support independent journalism. We need you more than ever. And make sure to tune in on Thursday to see Sharmeen Arwani and see everything. And I'm sure she has plenty to say, in particular about our very, very, pessimistic takes that we have here in general. She's usually the one that brings the optimism to these discussions. So I'm sure that'll be interesting. Thank you so much, you guys, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Bye bye.